What is up, you guys? Thank you so much for joining me for a return episode of True Crime with Prince. And if you are new here, hello and welcome. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of true crime case I have for you today? And if this is the kind of content that you are interested in, please do subscribe to the channel and also comment to let me know what you think about this one at the end of the episode. But thank you so much for supporting the channel, and thank you so much to those that have been around since the very beginning, still supporting my channel to this day. So let's just go ahead and get into the case. But before we do, I would like to say, guys, I know it's been a while. It's been a very long time since you guys heard from me. And well, I did say before in my last video, life is a little bit of a roller coaster at the moment. I've got so many things that I'm juggling that it's really difficult for me to manage a YouTube channel while managing all these new responsibilities. I have responsibilities that I didn't have back in 2021, back in 2022, back in 2023 when I could consistently upload on the channel. I've got those kind of responsibilities now, and they are limiting my time and my space for a YouTube channel. But I am trying to find a good workaround, trying to find a good workaround, trying to find a way to make it better. Hopefully that works. Hopefully I can find a much better way to manage my schedule. And also, if you've noticed, the recording style is a little bit different. I am not in front of the camera, and that is because I am trying to find a much better recording space. At the moment, my recording space is not really in the best condition. So for the time being, this is how we are going to do it. I already have another case ready for you guys, so which means next week you will get another episode. And yeah, I'm going to try as best as I can to be consistent with it. So I'm really sorry about the long hiatus that I was on, but I'm going to try to be back now on a much regular schedule. Let's see how it goes. Maybe the strategy that I'm using now might work. So let's go ahead and get into it. So today we're going to be talking about the case of a very well-known BBC reporter. She was unfortunately murdered in the 1990s, and we are going to look at her case and see what exactly could have happened to her, and perhaps you guys might have some theories on how this case could have been solved. And maybe you've heard about it, maybe you haven't, but if you have, do let me know what you've thought about it when you heard about it for the first time. Do let me know what you think about it now. Let's talk about it in the comments. And again, guys, if you are new, please remember to subscribe and like the video. That would really, really help me out. So let's go ahead and get into the case of Jill Wendy Dando. So Jill Wendy Dando was born on November 9th in 1961 at the Ashcombe House Maternity Home in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset. Her parents were Jack Dando and Mary Jean Harkey. She had an older sibling by the name of Nigel, and Nigel was born in 1952. And her brother worked as a journalist for BBC Radio Bristol before he retired in 2017. Now, when it comes to her educational background, before she went on to study journalism, she had quite a long educational background before that, but she did go on to study journalism at the South Glamorgan Institute of Higher Education. When it comes to her career, Jill's first job was as a trainee reporter for the local weekly newspaper known as the Western Mercury, where both her dad and her brother also worked. Now, after 5 years as a print journalist, she started to work for the BBC, becoming a newsreader for BBC Radio Devon in 1985. So in that same year, in 1985, she also transferred to BBC Southwest, and at BBC Southwest, she presented a regional news magazine program. And then in 1987, she then went on to work for Television Southwest. She also worked for BBC Spotlight in Plymouth. Now, in early 1988, Jill's career took an incredible turn because this is when she moved from regional to national television in London to present BBC television news, and she specifically worked the short on the hour bulletins that aired on both BBC One and BBC Two from 1986 to the mid 1990s. Jill presented the BBC television programs known as the Breakfast Times, the Breakfast News, the BBC 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock news, the travel program Holiday, as well as the crime appeal series known as Crime Watch, which she worked on until her death. Now, guys, I have to say, with all of this information, you have to see that Jill's career it was actually one of the most high profile careers of any reporter in the BBC at that time. And there is even much more information to go over because of that. There is much more information about her career that you can find on the internet. I just wanted to give you a little bit of what she did and what she accomplished, but there is still much more that she did with her career. So with all of this information that I've given you now, you can see that Jill had a very successful career as a reporter. With that being said, she was also the 1997 BBC Personality of the Year. So again, she had quite a successful career as a reporter. When it comes to her personal life, from 1989 to 1986, Jill was in a relationship with a BBC executive by the name of Bob Wheaton. When her relationship with Bob Wheaton came to an end, she then got into another relationship with a man named Simon Basil, but it was also a very brief relationship. But then in December of 1997, Jill was then set on a blind date with a physician by the name of Alan Farthing. And it turns out that Alan Farthing was actually Queen Elizabeth II's very own personal physician at that time. I'm not sure about now. Now, at that time, Alan was separated from his wife, and a few months later, when his divorce was finalized, he and Jill made the announcement that they were engaged to be married, and the wedding was set to happen on September 25th in 1999, and they announced their engagement on January 31st in 1999. Now, a few months after their engagement, Jill went to a house that she owned in Fulham. It's a house that she used to live in, but at the time she was in the process of selling it, so she hardly visited the home. The reason she went there this time around on April 29th was so she can collect some contract documents that were faxed to her by her agent. But as soon as Jill reached her front door around 11:32 in the morning, she was shot with a single bullet to the head. Her body would then be discovered by her neighbor about 14 minutes later. And once her body was discovered, the police were called around 11:47 in the morning, and then she was taken to the nearby hospital where she was pronounced dead on arrival around 1 p.m. The neighbor, a man named Richard Hughes, said he heard a scream, and at first he thought it was someone surprising somebody else, but he didn't hear a gunshot. Now, my personal guess is perhaps the shooter used a silencer to mask the noise of the shot, but he said that he didn't hear any gunshot, he just heard a scream. So after hearing the scream, Richard looked out of his window, and even though he didn't realize what happened, he made a brief sighting of the killer. Now, according to Richard, he saw a 6-foot tall white man around his 40s walking away from Jill Dando's house. So forensic investigation revealed that she was shot with a single bullet from a 9mm short caliber semi-automatic pistol, with the gun actually pressed to her head when her life was taken. When they also investigated the cartridge, they saw that it appeared to have been subject to modification, possibly to reduce its propellant charge and therefore allow it to function as subsonic ammunition. Ballistics investigations also determined that the bullet had been fired from a smooth bore barrel without any rifling. So this means the murder weapon was almost certainly a blank firing pistol that had been illegally modified to fire live ammunition. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise that during the investigation, Jill's murder received intense media coverage. I mean, we're talking about one of the most well-accomplished BBC reporters of the time, so it received a lot of attention. Now, the investigation was spearheaded by the Metropolitan Police, named Operation Oxborough. Now, for over a year, unfortunately, they couldn't couldn't find anything that could lead to what happened to Jill. And if you think about it, Jill being a well-known public figure probably came in contact with a lot of people in her life. And not only that, she was known by possibly millions around the world because, again, she was a well-known reporter. Now, the authorities did not believe that this could have been a professional hit, like an assassination, because the crime scene had too many signs of an amateur shooting, such as the use of a converted black firing pistol as the murder weapon. Now, another reason was the fact that Jill was shot in public at her doorstep instead of being forced inside her house, where her body wouldn't be easily discovered until someone actually went out to look for her at the house. When forensic psychologists got involved on the case, they predicted that the person who took Jill's life would instead be a loner with a severe personality disorder. And within 6 months of the investigation, the team had spoken to more than 2,500 people and had taken more than 1,000 statements. So they were really trying to figure out exactly what could have happened to Jill. But again, being as well known as Jill was, it wasn't going to be easy to solve a case like this. So as I've mentioned, after a year, there still wasn't a lot of progress achieved by the police. But they now started to focus their sights on a man named Barry George. And Barry lived about 500 yards from Jill's house in Fulham. Now, according to his record, Barry George had a history of stalking women. He also had a history of sexual offenses and other antisocial and attention-seeking behaviors. George was put under surveillance and then he was arrested on May 25th in 2000, and he was charged with the murder of Jill Dando on May 28th in 2000. When the investigators went through his stuff, they found 4,000 photos of hundreds of women that were taken without their knowledge by Barry George. And not only that, these photos also included those of other well-known female TV personalities. And this man also had newspaper cutouts that spoke about Jill's life and career. Police also discovered a photograph of Barry George wearing a military mask while he was also posing with a modified blank firing handgun. And when he was confronted with this, he admitted that yeah, it was him in the picture, and yeah, he did buy that weapon, but he denied it being converted to fire live ammunition. Now, the trial of Barry George for the murder of Jill Dando was held at the Old Bailey in early May of 2001. The opening statements from the prosecution highlighted the fact that Barry had an exaggerated interest in TV personalities and in firearms. The prosecution also mentioned photographic evidence regarding his obsession with celebrities that was collected from his apartment. The prosecution also mentioned the photo that was found with Barry posing with that modified blank firing pistol, which was similar to Jill Dando's murder weapon. One other interesting thing that was mentioned was the fact that Barry George was picked out of an identity parade by two different neighbors of Jill as the man who was acting suspiciously opposite her house in Gowen Avenue on the morning of her murder. So remember a minute ago I mentioned that newspaper cutouts of Jill's life were found in his apartment, right? Well, during the trial's opening statements, it was also mentioned that newspaper cutouts of articles relating to Jill's murder were also found in his apartment. And not only that, authorities also found a handwritten list of names and personal details of various other British celebrities. Now, the prosecution also mentioned that forensic examination revealed that a jacket belonging to Barry was seized from his apartment, and there was gunshot residue in the pocket of the jacket. And when this gunshot residue was investigated, it was found to be the same type that was found on Jill's deceased body. It was believed that the gunshot residue had originated from the detonation of the percussion cap of the bullet that killed Jill Dando. And furthermore, the prosecution also mentioned that George had visited a disability health center in Griswold Street, which was approximately half a mile from Growan Avenue, without an appointment about 20 minutes after Jill was murdered. Now, it is said that George went back to the disability center a few days later requesting information of the exact time of his previous visit on the day of Jill's murder. Now, the prosecution believed that this was Barry's way of trying to create an alibi for himself regarding his whereabouts around the time of Jill's murder. And he did the exact same thing to a taxi company, whereby he went and visited the offices of this taxi company around 1 p.m. on Fulham Palace, and then he later went back to the taxi company requesting surveillance of his exact time of visit. Now, George later claimed that the reason he was doing all of this, the reason he wanted to get all of that information from these two places, was so that he could account for his movements after being told by a lot of people that he matched the photo fit picture of the murder suspect issued out by police. But get this, police records actually proved that the photo fit wasn't released to the public until 4 days after Jill's murder. So this reason made absolutely no sense. So when it was time for the defense to present its case, the defense claimed that Jill Dando's murder was a result of a professional hit. And they also argued that the microscopic speck of gunshot residue found inside Barry George's coat pocket was the only real evidence the prosecution had against the defendant. And without it, the prosecution had no real evidence that he committed the crime. The defense also argued that the reason the gunshot residue was found inside the coat pocket to begin with could have been due to a cross-contamination from police officers. Another argument raised by the defense was that even though police had found photographic evidence of Barry George stalking other women and writing down their personal details on a list, they never uncovered anything like that regarding Jill Dando specifically. So they denied claims that he had been stalking her leading up to the murder. Now, in closing statements, the prosecution denied claims made by the defense that Jill's murder was the result of a contract killing. The prosecution argued that when all of the collected circumstantial evidence was analyzed as a whole, the only suspect it pointed to for the murder was Barry George. And when the prosecution raised this point, the defense countered by saying there wasn't any conclusive evidence that placed Barry George at the scene of the crime on the morning of the murder. The defense said statements came in from several witnesses, but they gave different descriptions of his clothing, his complexion, and hairstyle, so there wasn't any conclusive evidence. Another argument that the defense disputed was the claim that after George returned home to change clothes, he went to the disability center to create an alibi for himself. The defense said it would make no sense for a gunman to be out in public after successfully evading detection in the first place. On July 2nd in 2001, it took the jury 30 hours of deliberations to find Barry George guilty as charged by a majority verdict, and he was supposed to serve a mandatory life sentence in prison. Now, I don't know if you realize, but I did say he was supposed to. And that's because there were concerns about Barry George's conviction on the basis that the evidence against him was too thin. Barry made 2 unsuccessful appeals, but then the gunshot residue forensic evidence was discredited and excluded from the case. And once this happened, Barry made a 3rd appeal, which ended up being successful in November of 2007. After he made this successful appeal, the original conviction was then quashed, and a second trial took place. Now, the second trial took 8 weeks to happen, and at the end of it, Barry George was actually acquitted of the murder, and he was acquitted on August 1st in 2008. And to this day, the murder of Jill Dando remains unsolved. And the question is, after so many years, will it ever be solved? You know, guys, it baffles my mind when cases go unsolved for so long, because somebody somewhere has to know something. I am willing to bet my arm that somebody out there knows something, and because of their silence, this woman has been denied justice for so many years. It is just infuriating to think about. But guys, that was the mysterious case of Jill Dando, and I just hope that someday she will get the justice that she deserves and her family can also have closure as to what happened to them. This was someone's daughter, this was someone's sister, this was someone's fiance, and her life was just taken just like that. But alright, guys, do let me know what you think about this case in the comment section. Was the evidence truly not enough to convict Barry George? Could this really have been a professional hit? And lastly, is there any hope that it will ever be solved? Let me know what you think in the comments, and also hit the like button to make sure that this video can reach out to more people. But that is it from me today, guys. Again, thank you so much for staying with me, and I do see the new subscribers that are coming in every now and then, so I do appreciate that. And also thank you guys so much for still staying and supporting my channel. And again, if you are new here, please do remember, if this is your type of content and you want to hear more stories like this, do subscribe to the channel and also hit that like button as well. And I will see you guys again next week with a new episode. We will be talking about the murder of Jason Corbett. All right, guys, do take care of yourselves, and until next time, I'll see you.